Hello again, this is Pastor Tim from Bend and Lomita United Methodist Churches in Central Texas, serving the small communities of Texas. We have been doing podcasts on the Bible because we think it's a difficult book to read. It's a difficult book to get into and understand, and oftentimes we need help. So especially for people who are just beginning, we try to give some kind of frame of reference. We talked about themes of the Bible and books of the Bible, and now we're going through some of the stories of the Bible. And we're in Genesis. We've come through creation up to the time of Adam and Eve disobeying God. I can imagine that sitting around a campfire at night, one of the kids asked their dad, how did we get to where we are? How come everything is not like it is in a garden, the way God created it? And so the dad said, let me tell you a story. And he begins with the story of Adam and Eve and talks about their relationship, how they walked with God in the garden. But God said, there are two trees that you're not to eat. You can eat anything in the whole garden, but not these two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God was not just being restrictive. God was saying you can't handle it. If they know what good and evil are, then they have to decide. And human beings will make poor decisions at times, maybe a majority of the time. But if they don't know the difference between good and evil, then we have the assumption that they would choose good. Now they're going to know the difference. So God said, don't eat of the fruit of that tree. Along came the serpent. The serpent, it says, was wilier, was more cunning than any of the other creatures. It doesn't say that he was evil. It just says that he was a troublemaker. He asked the woman, what did God say? That's the first time that somebody has challenged what God would say. And the woman said that if you eat of the fruit of the tree, or if you touch it, you will die. And that's adding to God's word. Eve, even before she eats the apple, adds to what God said. God didn't say that. Go back and read earlier in Genesis. God didn't say that. And we're going to know that they didn't physically die. What's going to die is their innocence. What's going to die is their sense of being secure. They are now found out they're vulnerable to being hurt by each other and vulnerable to be alienated from God. So the serpent says, you won't die, and which is physically true. On one level, that's true. On another level, it isn't. They will die some. And the woman looks at the fruit and says, well, it's pretty to the eye. It's aesthetically pleasing. Everybody wants beauty. It is healthy. If you eat fruit, that your body is healthier. Everybody wants health. If you become wise, that's education. And everybody wants to be smarter, to know more, to be educated. What she didn't say was that if she has some knowledge of good and evil like God does, then they will be like God. They will make their own decisions. They will be in charge. I think that's the problem that human beings have had. Their entire existence is trying to be in control, try to seize control from God. Say, God, that's what we're doing. That's not, we disregard what you do, even though God created the world and knows what's best way to live in it. And so she eats of the apple, or not, we don't know what kind of fruit it is, eats of the fruit and then passes it to her husband, Adam, who's standing right there. He wasn't a victim. He was there participating in what was going on. At least by his lack of conversation, he's agreeing to it. And And so they eat of that fruit, and all of a sudden they realize they're naked. They've been naked before, but it didn't seem to matter. Now they are vulnerable. They're vulnerable to each other, to hurt each other. They're vulnerable to be separated from God. So they hide. Now God walks in the garden, but we know that God already knows what's going on. And so God calls out to Adam, and Adam says, "Here I am." And he says, "Why were you hiding?" He says, "Well, Eve gave me an apple, or gave me a fruit, and I ate of it." And he says, "It's her fault." "Well, actually, it's your fault, God, because you gave her to me." And then Eve says, "Well, it's not my fault, it's the snake's fault." And so we have a series of explanations about some of human nature, that there'll always be enmity between the snake and the people, and the snake will crawl on the ground and eat the dust. A woman will have a desire for her husband, but also the result was childbirth, which would be painful to her. The man will work, but some of his work will not come to fruition. It will not be productive, so there'd be the frustration of work that doesn't accomplish anything. So God then makes them fur clothes. The fig leaves that they were using were rather scratchy and inadequate, so they get fur coats, and which will protect them. So God is still seeking their well-being, even though they won't be in the garden anymore. They have to be out in the garden because if they eat of the fruit of life, then they would be forever living forever, and living with the consequences of their actions. So God sends them out into the world, and God's going to be with them, though. That's the difference. God doesn't abandon them. God doesn't. It's not punishment in the sense of what we might think of punishment, but just you've separated yourself from your beginning. And I think we'll spend all of history trying to return to the beginning with an intimate relationship with God, with an intimate relationship with creation, and intimate relationship with each other. Well, I hope that's helpful, and I'll see you next time.